We've got a great MacBreak Weekly for you. Public betas everywhere, iOS public betas, El Capitan public betas, the dangers of running a public beta. Microsoft Office comes out of beta for the Mac. Plus, Comic-Con, Pluto, Apple Pay in the UK, stuff like that. Andy Ihnatko, Alex Lindsay, and Renee Ritchie join me. I'm Jason Snell. Next, MacBreak.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for MacBreak Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 463, recorded July 14th, 2015. It's the company car.
MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by Braintree. If you're working on a mobile app and searching for a simple payment solution, check out Braintree. With one simple integration, you can offer your customers every way to pay, period. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to BraintreePayments.com/MacBreak. And by Squarespace. Squarespace is the best way to create a beautiful website or online store. Enter the offer code MacBreak and get 10% off. Squarespace, build it beautiful. And by Wealthfront. Wealthfront is a low-cost, automated investment service that's the most sophisticated way for you to invest your money. Whether you've got millions or you're just starting out, visit wealthfront.com/MacBreak to sign up and get your free personalized investment portfolio. That's wealthfront.com/MacBreak.
Welcome back to MacBreak Weekly. I am not Leo Laporte. I'm Jason Snell from sixcolors.com and theincomparable.com, filling in for Leo in this endless rotation of MacBreak Weekly hosts, which I think actually it's not endless. It will come to an end very soon, and Leo will be back. I'm joined by three excellent guests for this week's edition of MacBreak Weekly. To my right, in person, it is Alex Lindsay from the Pixel Corps. Hey,
hello,
Alex, how's it going?
It's going very well.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Should I faint during my hosting stint here, I expect you to revive me and or take over.
I'm ready. I'll mostly just take over and just kind of
that's good.
Kick your feet to the side.
That's right. That's right. Give me a swift kick so it wakes me up.
Exactly.
All right, fair enough. From the great nation of Canada and the great website of imore.com, it is your friend Renee Ritchie. Hi, Renee.
Hey, Jason. It's great to be here with you again.
Are you going to be a well-behaved guest?
I'm going to be incredibly polite, and I will apologize for everything, including my apologies.
So basic Canadian, then.
Absolutely.
All right. I appreciate that. And not from Canada, but rather from somewhere in mysterious wilds of New England, from the Chicago Sun-Times and many other places. It's Mr. Andy Ihnatko. Hi, Andy.
Well, most of the Boston Bruins that I followed as a kid, with the exception of Bobby Orr, were Canadians.
Oh, well, that's true.
I don't know if that counts for something.
Boston is practically Canada, I think, or I may have failed geography.
When we need parking, we'll take that.
Sure. Well, so big week on all things Apple, and fortunately, this is the show where we get to talk about it. I wanted to start with various public betas, or as I understand they call it in England, betas. iOS 9 public beta is the first time that we've had a public beta of a major iOS update, because the public beta program for iOS only started earlier this year. I have to ask all of you, are you running iOS 9 on devices that you actually care about? Because that seems really scary to me. Renee, are you using iOS 9 every day now?
Yeah, I'm blessed and cursed to have all the old devices lying around. So if there is an emergency, I can just charge an old device. But I have iOS 9 on my iPhone 6 Plus, my iPad Air 2, and on an iPhone 6, because I wanted to see the public beta was different than the developer beta.
Do you have an emergency phone that you can back up to in case of
an iPhone 5S?
Disaster?
I have that running 8.4.
Wow, bold move. So, Andy, what about you? Do you have this on anything that you care about, or do you have it sequestered away somewhere?
I know. I every time there's a new beta, I always feel like that scene in the movie 2010 where Dr. Chandra is talking to like Sal, saying, "Now, Sal, if we're going to understand what happened to Hal, I'm going to need to shut you down. Now, do you understand what's going to happen? Will I dream? Of course you will, Sal. All intelligent creatures dream." You would never do that to a phone, put beta software on a phone without explaining you might never wake up from this. So no, I don't have it on my iPhone is now like my primary device. So no, I do have it on on an iPad Air that I don't own. I do not have it on the iPad that I do own. But I've been finding it pretty stable. But for putting it on a phone where if you have a car with more than 90,000 miles on it, you want to make sure that phone is always working wherever you might wind up. And for that reason, no, I would never put a beta of anything.
You also never know what the next beta is going to do. Like maybe 3 is great, but then 4 is going to have a problem. So it's always a risky proposition.
Yeah, or what apps are going to break with it. And it being without Evernote when I'm in New York for a meeting is about as bad as being without. I would much rather be without like actual phone service than without Evernote on a day like that.
What about you, Alex? Are you?
I just follow Renee's updates.
Are you sporting the beta? You just read what Renee writes.
Yeah,
and
I just
stay safe.
I have to admit, I usually upgrade my OS when the next one. I'm always like one whole OS behind on most things. For most of my computers and stuff. With my phones, I actually wait usually a couple weeks to see if when it actually goes public release, like not beta, but I usually wait a couple weeks for it to kind of I have little iPod touches and some old iPads that I'll throw it on, but I won't touch anything that's in beta yet.
Well, I mean, we talk about this all the time that iOS betas are scary, and as Renee said, sometimes it's every other beta that gets you, and then and you get lulled into this false sense of security, like, oh, it's great, I'll update to the next one. Oh no, everything's ruined. Yeah. But when it's a Mac beta, I feel like you have workarounds and it's easier to recover. But an iOS beta is scary. It can be hard to restore back to a previous version, and you rely on your phone in some ways that you don't rely on other devices. So now that this is the first time that the general public has been able to just sort of freely get a beta, I keep saying you should really think twice before you do it, because especially on your main phone.
And think twice more.
I think I have enough trouble. I have enough trouble with the release version on my phone. I don't need to have a beta. It's even worse. I mean, I will say that the iPhone, I mean, one thing that Steve Jobs really was focused on in the beginning was that the one thing it had to do is be good at making phone calls and do those things. And that's no longer really, I don't think, an issue, because I have times when the phone just hangs up on the call, like hangs with the call kind of half in, half out. I have things where you see it ringing, you can't answer it. You have, all kinds of little things. And so I think that's enough instability for me.
I'm just shocked that you use your phone as a phone.
I know.
Occasionally. I do. Usually the first words when I pick up the phone are, "Why are you calling me?" There's this thing called Slack. Use it. So anyway.
Yeah.
Renee,
for me, it's not only that, but it's also like I lost Wi-Fi on my MacBook that wasn't running a beta like last week, and we all have problems with our Macs and all of our devices. For me, I'd much rather not have to worry about, okay, what of the 9 things this could this now be number 10 or number 11 because I'm running a beta. It's like that's just like that conceptual difference between something I'm counting on to work all the time and something where if this works up, no problem, I'll just move from the desk to the sofa.
I can understand it if the objective in running the beta is to fix a problem you have. I heard from a lot of people who upgraded their Macs from 10.10.3 to the beta of 10.10.4 because it fixed a bunch of DNS-related stuff. But for something like iOS 9, what you're really doing, you're doing it because you want to see what the future is like, and you're going to take this huge risk that your apps are going to start breaking because the app developers can't even submit apps that are tied to iOS 9 to the App Store, or even beta test them in test flight now. So what do we get out of running a beta that would make us take a risk like that?
On the iPad Air 2, just the ability to have side-by-side apps, even if they're only limited to just ones that Apple furnish, that's amazing. I'm taking my not mine iPad out a lot more than my actually mine iPad, just for the ability to have my inbox here or have a Safari pane over here while I'm actually writing something. I'm using Notes as my word processor because it's a working word processor that accepts and works with a split screen. If you've been sad that you keep using a notebook when you really think that your iPad could be about 90% of what you need, I would even, that would tempt me to say that if I'm going to be going to Comic-Con, let's say for 3 or 4 days, I would say I'm willing to risk losing Wi-Fi or something not happening because this was so much what I've been begging for as a productivity thing for iPads. It's a great thing.
We should point out too that Apple has gone, because this is the first iOS beta, Apple's gone to pains to sort of make it easier. Like you don't have to do the developer install process. You download a certificate and that enables you to download iOS 9. And Apple's pretty clear on that page to tell you to make an iTunes backup and then archive that backup, because you won't be able to restore later. If you want to back out of it from your iOS 9 beta, you'll need that iOS 9 backup. You'll need that iOS 8.x backup. So I think they understand that it's a very different audience than the traditional Mac audience who might do betas. And they are putting these things in place, which, while not perfect, at least sort of lessen the blows considerably.
Renee, you wrote a really nice first look of iOS 9 on iMore. And I'm just wondering, I know Andy just mentioned the kind of amazing side-by-side iPad feature, which I bought an iPad Air 2 just to test it out because it was so great. Are there other features that should I feel like we're doing something evil here and tempting people to install a public beta? But what
don't install. Oh my God, the new features are so awesome.
Instead of installing a public beta, friends, Renee, perhaps you could tell people what they will be not getting until the fall.
Well, no, like what Andy mentioned, the side-by-side apps are absolutely killer on the iPad. Only the iPad Air 2 gets them, alas, because it's the only one with an A8X processor and 2 gigabytes of RAM. And apps have to share the resources. Apps are used to having all the resources to themselves, and some apps really take advantage of that. So it's going to be a while until apps are sort of constraining themselves down to sharing resources. But that's iPad Air 2 only. The sidebar apps, the slide over, is iPad Air 2, and the latest 2 iPad minis. So that's more encompassing, and the picture-in-picture is the same thing. So not everyone gets them, but it is an absolutely killer feature. But there's a lot of other small things in there, like the keyboard will work as a trackpad on the iPad. It's worked on the iPhone as well in some betas, currently doesn't work, so we'll have to see if that carries over. But small things like that make it much easier to move around the insertion point. And then you have just a bevy of things that sort of smooth out the experience. There are things, Siri is a lot smarter, and Spotlight now is consistent with Siri. It's not exactly the same. You can't put commands into Spotlight yet, but it's been replaced by something called Search, and it can give you sports results and movie results and all sorts of other things. So if it's not socially appropriate to start talking to your phone, you can start typing into your phone and still get results. And it'll start to be a little bit predictive, not the way that Google Now is predictive, but it'll take a bunch of internet sources, bring them down to your phone, and try to preemptively give you some assistance, like what apps you're going to use, what people you want to talk to, when you have to leave for a meeting. So just generally throughout the OS, I think they've salted in a lot of small conveniences.
I really like I use my iPad in landscape mode a lot. And when you swipe down for Notification Center, you now get a split screen, like it's a 2-column view, which I think is a really, it's a pretty cool feature. So I'm liking that. I'll tell you, Renee, that using the trackpad style, 2 fingers down on the iPad keyboard, that takes some getting used to. I feel like I'm not yet competent in using the cursor on my iPad. I can't even believe I said that.
It was natural for me on the iPhone. I found on iPhone 6 Plus, I found I did it by accident because Apple never announced it for the iPhone, and it kind of worked in a couple betas. So I just did it. But I think the bigger takeaway for me is that Apple is starting to let the iPad be the iPad. They let it a little bit before, like with gesture navigation, but now they're really sort of allowing it to have, like you said, split screen notification. They're letting it have the extra toolbars in the predictive text area on top of the keyboard. They're letting it do things that fit in the context of an iPad but are no longer constrained by iPhone usage. And I think that will really help make the device better.
Alex, you ever going to use an iPad for work on anything?
I definitely use iPads.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have one. I will admit that I know I'm in the wrong show to say this, but I use a Windows the Surface 3 probably more.
This podcast is over.
Yeah, exactly. So I got a little frustrated by not being able to draw and not be able to do all the other things I needed to do when I was having a tablet. But we use the iPad a lot for display information and some basic stuff. We run a lot of our switchers with it, and so I mean, I think that for me, I kind of like the fact that I'm not split screening, but I'm looking forward to playing with it. I think I like the focus because on the other end, my Mac usually has like 40 windows open from 8 different apps, at the same time, and I'm constantly getting, not right now, I'm trying to be focused.
That is one of the things I like about using the iPad is that focus that you get when you are just in one app. Although
moving files from one app to the other is still,
right. and
frustrating.
The having two apps side by side it does that add another dimension to be able to kind of see what's going on in one and work on it in another. And I also hear from a lot of people who like to work, people I know who like to work with a movie playing in the background or something like that. And you can actually do that now on the iPad. You can just play a video and have it even be kind of off the side of the screen while you're working. And that's so that's going to be good.
You're just trying to plow through the 200 messages in your inbox that came in while you were in the air. That's not something that you can't do while watching an hour's worth of Bob's Burgers. No.
Yeah.
And it's cool because you can actually have a video. You can have the video app in one side. You can have Safari showing YouTube on the other side, and you can have some random picture-in-picture video up. And they won't all play at the same time, but as you hit the play button on one, the other ones will stop. So you can basically get, Andy can have Bob's Burgers and the latest episode of Flash, and maybe Amazing Race, all at high availability anytime you want them.
And those are the kind of things we'd like to be able to do. Some of the stuff we do with our Mac, we analyze a lot of video, live video usually, and being able to see it. You're watching it in one application and then actually using something like Soundflower or whatever, pushing it to other applications to monitor all the information and so on and so forth. And so being able to do that on an iPad would be useful because it's way stupid to do it with a Mac Mini, which is what we're doing now.
Oh, don't get me started on audio on iOS, because that's actually one of the things that my dream is always to be able to take an iPad with me on a trip and not my laptop. But I've never been able to really do it because I do podcasts, and you can't have sort of two apps. You can't have Skype going on an iPad and also recording your audio locally, because really only one app can have access to the audio. This is a nerdy thing, but it's one of those areas where I always come back to the Mac because the Mac's just more advanced on that stuff.
Well, and what I'm kind of, to get nerdy just for one more second, with the iPad, one of the things that is frustrating is there's no interfaces. There are a handful of interfaces for audio going in, but you should be able to put all kinds of things in there. It should be like a little breakout, and the closest you get to it is like the Mackie, whatever that is, that 16 channel or now 32 channel where you can put your iPad in. I don't need that much. I just need like a little breakout that pops into a Lightning, on the end that lets me put a bunch of different pieces of audio in and so on and so forth. And I feel like, I've been rooting for the USB-C to get, added to the iPhone and iPad, because I feel like the Lightning, registered BS is slowing down a lot of what could happen with this. If it was just an open connector, we'd end up with a lot more toys. I like toys.
But I do think that the multitasking, it points away toward an iPad that is going to have more functionality and is going to support some of the stuff that we don't have now. Because once you can see two apps at once, you start to ask yourself those questions. Ooh, what could I do with this?
It's like back in the days with OS 7. Remember it was like, or was it, it was like suddenly we went from OS 6 to like multitasking. We could do two things at one time. It was amazing.
Imagine, it blew our minds.
It's such a nice shift, not just for the iPad, but I think for the entire Apple product line, because one of the Achilles heels of Apple has always been that the entrance fee for mobile for laptops is minimum $900. If you want to actually get a laptop that does good things, minimum, you can't spend one dime less than $900. And you could always say that, oh well, they have budget computers in the form of the iPads. Well, so long as you really like to redefine what the term computer means to you. But with just these simple extra features, not only what we're talking about with split screen, but the added support for Bluetooth hardware keyboards and giving it practically parity with the virtual keyboard, that means that now you can walk in with $500 or $600 in your pocket and walk out with something that conceivably could be something you would buy instead of a very, very good $500 or $600 Windows notebook. It's a really great thing to see.
And I think that for me, I could probably survive on my iPad, most days, because a lot of mine is just answering questions. But it's just that the email. I think that the iPad and the iPhone were both designed for about someone who doesn't get more than 100 emails a day. I get about 450 actionable items a day, and it's just not like you can't find him half the time. And so I need my regular computer just to be able to manage it. And I find that I just wish. I'm quite happy to give mail 10 gigs of my iPad, to keep all my mail, local. I don't want to be limited to 500 or 1,000 of the last messages or whatever it is. There's some kind of limit there that is too low.
Hey, Renee, one of the things that I know that a lot of people have been talking about is how now that there's a public beta of iOS, there have been a lot of ugly app reviews posted in the App Store. This is one of the downsides of this. Have you noticed this? Federico Viticci wrote a nice piece on Mac Stories about it, and I think you guys have covered it at iMore. This idea that people are writing bad reviews of apps because they don't work in the iOS 9 public beta, as ridiculous as that is.
We do this post once a year whenever the beta starts to, usually when the beta comes out, often when more people start using the beta, that you have to remember that if you download a beta, you are saying I am a higher class of, not a higher class, but I am a different class of user.
Top hats,
I am someone
monocles.
I am someone who is accepting the responsibility of running beta software, and there's an exchange going on there. Previously, you couldn't even get AppleCare anymore if you put a beta on your phone. Now with the public beta, you still can, but it's something to be aware of. If your phone acts weird, it's because you put a beta on it, and there's certain things that you shouldn't do. Like you shouldn't like bugs. Bugs. They're supposed to be bugs. It's a beta. There's a whole system. There's a feedback app for you to report bugs. And especially when it comes to compatibility with other apps, like you said, developers are not even allowed to update their apps to iOS 9 binary compatibility until the Gold Master comes out, which is almost always the same day as the next iPhone event, which is usually September. So they can try to work around stuff, but there's a lot of stuff they just will not be able to fix. And we've seen examples. Luke from Adovia posted an example of someone giving his app a 1-star review because it didn't work well in iOS 9. And I don't think people understand how deeply those sorts of reviews affect developers. It literally hurts their ability to feed their families. And it's because you wanted to put on a beta and you did it knowingly, and the app has compatibility problems through no fault of the developers, and they get highly impacted from it. So we almost every year put up a post just reminding people to please obey Wheaton's law and not to be jerks about things when they're running a beta.
Yeah, there's I think as reviewers, and Andy and I go back a long way, longer than we'd like to admit, about how long we've been reviewing products. There is always this this idea that when you're looking at beta software, you're looking at it with the understanding that it probably doesn't work right, and that you need to leave a lot of your judgments by the door. You may pick them up later and walk through the door when it's declared final, but when something's a beta, especially on an operating system, you've got to change your frame of mind. You cannot be the righteous indignation, user who is furious that this app crashes because you're using beta software. You got to let it go.
I hope Apple would block it. Like I hope in the future Apple just blocks reviews on devices running beta software. So if you put on the beta, you no longer have the ability to review.
Yeah, that'd be very smart. I mean, I've when the betas dropped last week, I did the usual, just like right before the 4th of July, your local fire department releases a video to the local news of mannequins having their heads blown off by explosives, by fireworks. Our version of that is tweeting, look, remember, it's beta software. Do not expect it to work. It's a nice thing to take a look at. It's a nice curiosity, but don't put it on primary devices. And immediately you start getting, the beta's been very, very solid, or even the better version of that, which is, I think that a sufficiently knowledgeable user would have no difficulty in running a beta software. And you have to say, well, if you are sufficiently knowledgeable and confident to come back and challenge me with my assertion that you should not install beta software, by all means, go ahead. But a lot of people are getting the impression, particularly now that all you have to do is go to a web page, a beautifully presented web page on Apple's site, fill in your email address, you get an email back, and then you click one link that does nothing but install a provision that allows you to simply tap a button and update. It seems like it's such a consumer level experience getting these betas that people think that, I just get to get it I'm a special person who gets to get it a little bit early. No, you're helping to test this out so that other people can get a more reliable product in several months' time. And that's the only thing that we really have to combat, the perception that a beta is almost the same as actual release software.
And the good news is that it really is an opportunity to help developers and Apple, where when you find a bug, figure out, make it repeatable, and then report it.
Apple is listening, and the feedback assistant is in every version of their beta software, and they are paying attention. The reason they make it easy to get into the beta is because they do want a large enough number that it's impossible for Apple to test all the contingencies internally or with a developer group, because the developers are pretty homogenous. They're developers. And so they want to make it easy, but the downside of that is exactly what Andy described, which is then it's so easy that you start to think, this is just a preview of what's to come, and not what it really is, which is something that's partially broken and needs your help. And if you download and install the beta with that in mind and knowing what you're getting into, I think it's fine and good.
And the tips are the tip is when sending feedback, it is not it just doesn't work. Like this doesn't work. You know, like it's broken. It doesn't work.
Crashed.
It's crashed. It crashed when I was doing it. You know, what you do is you back up and you do it 2 or 3 times until you can get to, if you click this, if I'm in this app, I have this version, I click this, and then it crashes. And things get fixed like that. When you can send an engineer like click, 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 and it breaks, that it's repeatable, you've done it a couple times, you know that it works. You know, it's kind of fun.
It's also important to remember that if you report stuff early, because right now Apple engineers can fix lower priority bugs. If you start reporting things near the end of September or near the beginning of September, they're only going to fix showstoppers. Report the stuff like Alex said, give them steps. The wizard is really easy to use. And also, even if you think it's so obvious someone else has reported it, they might think the same thing, and consider it almost like an upvote. So if someone else has reported it and you report it and maybe 10,000 other people, the sheer mass of that will be helpful to someone who wants to get engineering resources assigned to it. They'll say, you know, 10,000 people reported this. We really have to fix it. So it's in everyone's best interest that you complain loudly and often.
Yeah. I would even go so far as to Renee has a great idea of saying if you're running on beta software, you're not allowed to report. You're not allowed to rate things in the App Store. I would even go so far as to say that you should have to turn 2 keys at 2 panels that are 10 feet away before you can log a 1-star review. Because there is nothing that has less credibility to me than a 1-star review. That is because it's literally the lowest rating you can possibly give. And the way that I always process that, because I've gotten only a handful of 1-star reviews on my books on Amazon, and I always have the same response. I said, let's say the person's name is Dave. And I said, well, Dave, so you're saying that if Amazon delivered my book to you and you open it up and every single page was blank except for me extending my middle finger at you and saying, screw you, Dave, you would have given it the exact same 1-star review because you could not possibly have given it a worse review. And at that point, Dave usually says, well, okay, I guess it was like a 2.5 or 3-star. I just didn't like you didn't cover this thing. It's usually the result of someone who's just angry and wants to note, I am angry with this and I want people to hear how angry I am. And that's the only way to do it.
Well, we have much more to talk about beta software because the Mac public beta came out this week for El Capitan as well. I am your beta host, Jason Snell. Fortunately, we have a fully tested and compliant host, Leah Laporte, who's going to tell you about one of our sponsors right now.
Jason, if you don't mind, I'd like to interrupt. They brought in me, the pro from Dover, to do this commercial here. And that's because I know all about Braintree Payments, and I love Braintree Payments. I had the pleasure of speaking to their CTO a while back and had such it was awesome. Because I love companies that support developers in making better apps, support not just developers, but their customers too. And Braintree Payments is a perfect example of an app that makes everybody happy. You want to add payments to your mobile app or your website, you got to check out BraintreePayments.com/MacBreak. Do what Uber did and Lyft. Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example. Those companies have figured it out so that it's a seamless, friction-free transaction. And who helped them do it? Braintree, Airbnb, Hotel Tonight, Living Social, Munchery, GitHub started with Braintree at the very beginning, taking payments. They do so. They continue to do so. And it's so great. They've got great support. It's easy to integrate, just a few lines of code. They work with every platform. It's a full-stack solution. So you're going to add payments of every kind with just a simple bit of code. I'm talking PayPal, credit cards, Apple Pay, even Bitcoin. BraintreePayments.com/MacBreak. Customer service is great. So if you have any trouble at all, in fact, if you go there right now, you can try their sandbox and see what your app would look like using Braintree's. They also solve that big issue for anybody who's got a mobile shopping cart. Abandonment. People, it's about 70% of your customers give up at the shopping cart. They're this close, but they're a little nervous about security or they don't understand how it works, and they abandon it. This will fix it. So secure. It's easy to use. Their one-touch SDK makes it so transparent for your users. I can go on and on. The best thing to do would be go to BraintreePayments.com/MacBreak. Check it out. And by the way, as a little bit of an incentive, they're going to give you your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free. BraintreePayments.com/MacBreak. If you've been doing the research, the due diligence, you've been looking around, you can stop. You found the one. BraintreePayments.com/MacBreak. Trust me, you're going to love it. Now, back we go to the MacBreak team and Jason Snell. Jason?
Thank you, Leo. Boy, that is how the pros do it. I appreciate it. He'll be back soon. Let's move on to more beta talk, because this is all beta all the time here, because we got the public beta of El Capitan last week as well, and developers got a third developer release. I think they're basically the same. I wrote a first look about this, but so did Renee. I guess we're El Capitan experts. Would you call yourself that at this point, Renee?
No, we're first lookers, maybe?
Yes, okay.
Lookers? I don't know.
Fair enough. So, I mean, El Capitan, one of the things about it is that, I don't know, I feel safer running a beta on the Mac. Does that make sense? That it's just, like there are workarounds and developers can post betas on their websites and that fix bugs. And it just, maybe it's just that I've been doing it for longer, but I'm a little less frightened about running a beta release of Mac OS X than I am of iOS. How about you?
I've realized that humans make absolutely no sense to me because, for example, I am more reticent to put a beta on my watch. And the watch, compared to my phone, is not that important. If my watch stopped working, I would still have my phone. It would be 2014 again, but I would be fine. But because the watch is so close to me and I don't know. I just feel much more trepidation towards putting the beta on my watch. And by the same token, the Mac is how I make my living. And I feel less worried about, like you said, putting the beta on my Mac than I feel about putting it on my phone, which literally could require me to call 911 to save my or someone else's life. So it makes absolutely no sense, but I think you're 100% right.
I think we're used to restoring, broken Macs, and I think we're used to working around problems on the Mac, and maybe we have a laptop and a desktop, so there's an emergency Mac we could use, and that's different than borking your iPhone where you're just it's gone and you're doomed. And I don't know, El Capitan though, in general, I mean, I know we talked about it before, it's been talked about on MacBreak Weekly before, but since people actually have a chance to get this for themselves now, what are they getting themselves into? Is there anything that stands out for you, Renee?
Yeah, it's similar to iOS 9, where one of the biggest features is just that they're putting a lot of time and effort into polishing it up. So you've got, again, a Spotlight that does a lot more assistive sort of things. There's still no Siri on OS X, but Spotlight does a lot more. The Notes app, like it has on iOS 9, has been substantially improved. So now you can embed all sorts of content into it. It's a bunch of little things that taken together, including security, privacy, just makes for a much better experience. There's no moonshots here. There's no radical redesign. There's no functional leap like there was with extensibility and continuity. It's just making everything better and smarter. And I think we sort of collectively needed that this year.
Yeah, Notes is not exactly the coolest. It's never going to win an award for coolest app on iOS or Mac, but people use it. It's there. And it exists, and why not? I feel like Apple knows that people use it, and even though it's not cool, they said, we should probably make this better because everybody's using it, even though it's just kind of generic Notes app. So I like seeing that.
It's great. I mean, they said more than 50% of people use Notes, and they wanted to make it a better app. I use it, admittedly, as a way to quickly sync stuff, like just as a syncable clipboard between my devices. And now you can put so many more data types. You can put iWork documents, map locations, all sorts of things can just be thrown in there. Pictures, you can do sketches on iOS that also show up on OS X. It's great. And on the screen right now, they're showing, it's not just a US release. There's a new Chinese and Japanese systems as well, a new Chinese font. You can do side-by-side Chinese characters. There's a predictive engine for Japanese text entry. There's a lot of really cool stuff here, but it's all sort of focused on using the Mac better.
Andy, do you have experience with El Capitan? Have you taken that plunge yet?
Yep, I have it on an iMac across the way from the office here. I like it. I think for me the biggest feature really is Spotlight, which is for me has always been a feature that always worked well, but it was so obvious that it could work better. And now it's got a lot more intelligence behind the searches. I mean, the ability to say, schedule an appointment with her at the place where we went that time, and it knows that, okay, by her, he probably means this person, by the place, all that sort of stuff. The ability to do natural language and say, open the last document, the last Word document that I touched, or the Word document I was working on last Tuesday. A lot of this, it's like Renee said, there's a lot of stuff that's little touches, like window management, that you would do with a $5 or $10 add-on is easier to navigate so long as you devote some mind space into remapping how you work with Windows. Oddly enough, one of the things I like the most about it is one of the things I like the most about the OS 9 update, which is, again, it's really weird, but the San Francisco font. The fact that they've swapped out, I don't know whether it's a better font per se. I'm not a font expert. But the fact that they've swapped out this font that's become so familiar to my eyes after so many years and just made this more interesting little font, but it's not so interesting that it gets in the way of my understanding what I'm seeing and what I'm doing. It's a lot like when you've got a brown house and now you've just painted it red. It's the same house, but there's something about every time you pull into the driveway, it looks newer, it looks fresher, it makes you a little bit happier when you see it. So less of a big change for it. It's not going to change the way that I use my Mac, but it's an improvement. Notes is also a big blockbuster. It's almost a brand new app. The only difficulty with it is that I have the same problem with it that I've always had with it, is that it's an Apple-only party, and if you once you get into the habit of a good notes manager like Evernote, and you're just in the habit of, oh, I need that URL, I need that address, I need that phone number, I need that document, and when you get locked into this one system, now it becomes, oh my God, it's going to be such a problem if I want to switch to a different phone at some point, or if I want to switch to a different tablet or a different notebook. And I'm as good as the update to Notes is, I can't think of a single Notes app that would be so good that I would risk being locked into one platform in order to keep on using it. It's just way too important an app for me.
Yeah, I think Notes is its strength is that it's the default, and that's why so many people use it. And once you're somebody who's got an Android phone in the mix, or you're starting to think about using Evernote, you've probably left the Venn diagram of the Notes app behind at that point. But so many people use it just because it's there. And I wanted to add that up until El Capitan, Notes synced through an IMAP mailbox in your email account, which also meant if you had a device that didn't have email installed on it, you couldn't sync Notes because it would just refuse to open. And now it uses iCloud. It will still use the old method, but most of the new features are built into Notes that are on iCloud, and it's good. I don't know why it took this long, and it's kind of a clever hack, I suppose, that they were hiding all your notes in your email account, but it was also wrong. And I'm glad that is over now. Alex, you using El Capitan anywhere? I
think 10.8.6 is awesome.
That's what I thought.
How's that color Apple logo with Apple menu looking for you?
He doesn't even have Helvetica Neue as the system font. We're going to think of 2015 as the year of Helvetica Neue, but it's gone now with San Francisco.
No, I'm current on this Mac, but I still think 10.8.6 was the last stable release. So I'm just going to say
10.10.4 is actually pretty good. I think.
No, this is 10.10.4, but it's good. We deal with a lot of really. It's not just Apple. It is all the hardware manufacturers that tie into all of our computers, and the last one that everything worked was 10.8.6, and then after that, it's just things break all the time.
I know people who deal with complicated hardware. And I certainly knew this when I was in the print magazine publishing industry. We had to deal with this, and it's with audio and video. It's the same thing. Man. You know, you get excited about a new release of an operating system in 2015 because you know that'll be what you're using in 2018.
Exactly.
And it's just the wheel of time. You're just watching everything. You're like on a TiVo or something. You're just tape delayed a few years.
Well, we have apps that are randomly crashing, and I was like, "What operating system? Oh, it's got 10.10 on it." I was like, well, let's try one of the 10.8.6 because we have a couple machines that aren't allowed to be updated, and we put those on and they work perfectly.
There's a nice thread in the Mac Rumors forums that is the community there collecting a list of things that don't work right on El Capitan and some developer betas that have been released to address it. So I definitely looked at that. It said there are problems with logic, and I thought, well, I can't update then because I rely on that. And you know, at Macworld, we in our podcast studio, we were running Snow Leopard for. I think it still is running Snow Leopard. They may have just upgraded it in the last 9 months, but because Lion broke a lot of audio stuff, and so we just kept it on Snow Leopard, and that is weird, but you know, it happens. In fact, two utilities that I use all the time, Super Duper and Default Folder, they both announced that they don't work with El Capitan because of this new security system, which is a great security system, rootless access. It prevents a lot of problems where hackers are able to get access to your Mac and do things to it because they have root permissions because you're an administrator. your user is set to administrative powers, and that's been reduced in El Capitan, which is great unless your utility relies on those powers. And SuperDuper did that, and Default Folder did that, and Dave Nanian wrote a nice blog post on the SuperDuper blog about how they're working around it and finding ways to create a backup in El Capitan, and John Godot did the same thing on the Default Folder website about how they were going to have to essentially rewrite the app, but it would be, in the end, it would be all worth it because they could do some things that they didn't do before, but it's all prompted by the fact that their apps just don't work, and the security model in El Capitan, it's not a bug that's causing them to break. It's breaking because the OS
like
has changed.
sandboxing part 2.
There's actually a new blog post from Dave this morning saying that turns out Apple fixed the problem with copying the com.apple.rootless attribute in the public beta. So with the release of our beta 2, which is downloadable below, we've included the ability to copy with that preserved, and thus system protection is maintained in the copy as well. Plus, there's no need to erase when restoring.
Right. Their first beta, you could restore to the beta, but it would keep that security feature would be switched off at that point, and now it'll stay on.
Right. So it just shows you how fluid the flow of betas is, and how it's you're sort of in for a bit of a whitewater ride until the release the release one is actually put out.
And it can be fun, but you need to know when you're getting in that raft that you are going to get some whitewater. You will see some rocks.
Wear a helmet and read the liability waiver.
Yeah, every row will get wet. So you just got to be careful about that. I'm excited. El Capitan also brings us version 1.1 of the Photos app.
Yes.
Which is great. And I'm excited because they seem to have listened. This is one of those examples where you get that next version, and is it stuff that people want, or is it stuff that nobody wants, but they're giving us anyway? And Photos 1.1, it's the stuff that everybody was asking for. Renee, here's a little on the screen. We've got my piece about it. I mean, it's got geolocation, it's got sorting, it's got editing, batch editing of data. It's got Photos extensions for editing. Is
all that stuff enabled yet? Because when I did mine, it was beta 1, and all that stuff was theoretically there, but you couldn't actually edit the fields yet.
So in the public beta, you can batch edit titles, you can batch edit locations, and individually edit titles and locations, of course. You can sort. Apple says you're going to be able to sort by date, title, and other things. In the current beta, you can sort by date, forward or backward, and by title. And there are no other things at this point. And there are no photo extensions yet, editing extensions, so far as I can tell.
Well, developers have to write those and submit them as El Capitan apps, which they can't do yet. So we have to wait on October for that.
Yeah, and my understanding is it's using the same extension system more or less as the one that's in iOS, which is cool because they should be able to use those extensions in both places. But
the only really cool thing is I think for OS 10 they're going to be allowed to write actual headless apps. Like in iOS you still have to have an appy app, and then the extensions come with it, and you kind of get in a little bit of trouble if your app does nothing besides the extensions. But in OS 10 they clearly say you can have an app with filters, for example, and just a downloadable filters extension. Which is cool for people who don't want to have to worry about a useless app just cluttering up their system.
Do you know if extensions can only come from the App Store, or can they come from third parties? Do they have to be provided by the App Store?
That's actually a really interesting question, because I figure you could hack the process. I don't know if that would get you very far. I'm sure the App Store is going to be the best way to get it, because it's designed to deliver apps that way. Yeah, but there's a lot of really smart hackers out there, Jason.
Scary.
I know that a lot of people think. I have to admit that if an app is under $50, unless it does something magical, and I mean magical, like unicorn, I won't buy it if it's not on the Mac App Store. I don't want to manage it. Just as a note, I won't even touch it. Because I deal with this. I update my computer, and what's great is that I just go in, I get a new operating system, and I just reinstall everything, and I don't have to think about it, and it's just not worth sorting. If it's magical, there's a couple magical apps that I have that I bought and put on because they do something that you can't do inside the sandbox. But otherwise, when people have goofy little apps that there's 10 of them in the App Store, even if theirs is better, it really has to be a lot better for me to go, I'm going to manage that install again somewhere else.
Yeah, and the ones that tend to be broken during a beta are the ones that are doing something weird and magical.
Exactly.
Like SuperDuper and Default Folder as two examples. They're doing it outside of the constraints of the operating system, and Apple's made a change, and now they have to.
And SuperDuper is actually one of those magical apps.
Yeah, it is.
But I think a lot of people are trying to work around that, and I just don't. I think it's also just a trust issue for me now. I just don't want to have something in my system.
Renee, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna make a crack about Core Audio and Foundation. Seems to break every beta.
Speaking
thing is, there's.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the only thing that I'm still missing from Photos is open an external editor, but I'm getting to the point where I haven't done it in so long now that I'm missing it less and less.
Yeah, you kind of get over thinking that way, that you're going to process it elsewhere. You sort of, if you're in Photos, you're going to be in all the way. I wanted to mention, like Snow Leopard and Mountain Lion, this is El Capitan, for those who don't know, who aren't native Californians, Northern Californians like I am, is a rock feature. It's a giant granite wall in Yosemite National Park. So this is like Snow Leopard and Mountain Lion. This is sort of the sub version of a previous version of the operating system. It's intended to be a lot of focus on speed and stability with some new features, but not necessarily the cascade of new features we saw last year. And one of the places where we're seeing that is Metal, which is the new technology, graphics technology that they rolled out in iOS 8 last year that's coming in El Capitan. And the thing that really encourages me about Metal is that, in the tech industry, they have this term dog fooding, which is that you use you use it yourself. You eat your own dog food is what the metaphor is, which is not the tastiest metaphor, I'll admit, but that's the idea. And some key OS X technologies use Metal. Core animation and core graphics in El Capitan use Metal, and that's good because it means the Metal's going to be solid because Apple relies on it, and they can walk down the hallway to the Metal guys and say, "Why doesn't this work?" And that's good, but it's also good because any app that uses these key foundational frameworks like core animation and core graphics will just get the speed boost that Metal provides when people go to El Capitan. So that's how I think Apple can make some of these speed claims that are pretty dramatic. They have varying, 50% here, 4 times as fast here, 2 times as fast here. But
the draw calls, Jason, all the draw calls.
But it's very exciting to see that. They've got lots of little graphics on their website showing those 4x and 2x kind of things. So I'm encouraged by that too, the Metal stuff.
The really important thing for me here is exactly what you said, is the dog fooding. And we can look back at the short history of iOS as an example. When you have things like Game Center and Apple has no products using it, and then Lauren Brichter comes out with Letterpress and just knocks it on its butt out of the gate. Or iCloud, the iCloud data syncing. Originally, Apple, I think Trailers app was the only thing that used it, and developers had nothing but problems. And then since last year, maybe the year before, Apple started building on their own technologies like CloudKit and PhotoKit is what powers all the new photo and cloud stuff. And like you said, Metal is what powers core graphics and core animation. And when the company is deeply invested in it, when you have their own engineers filing radars against it, and like I said, walking down the hallway and yelling, you get better products for everybody. And I hope this is not just coincidental, but is absolutely a sign of how they're going to be rolling out these really core, really important products going forward.
Yeah, I've heard from some game developers too who are very excited. One, because they develop games on the Mac, and it's going to be Metal and all of these additions to El Capitan are going to make their lives better. It's going to make it faster to do their development, to wait for things to run on the Mac. But also, since Metal is underlying iOS, it means that some stuff, it's going to be a lot easier to take a game on iOS and bring it to the Mac. And although Mac gaming is not a particularly huge market, one way to have a better selection of games on the Mac is to leverage the strength of games on iOS. So I think that's a good story too.
And I think there's a lot of glue apps. I mean, so the big apps take a long time to kind of absorb a lot of those things, big visual effects apps. But I think that there's lots of little apps that we use that I think are going to be much easier to write, much more powerful.
And Adobe has said that they're going to talk about big apps, the Creative Cloud apps, and move them all to Metal, and we'll see those benefits at some point. But there'll be short-term benefits just from everybody inheriting the new stuff in core animation and core graphics.
And it's also an interesting peek into how Apple's trying to get better performance out of all their hardware, that they don't have control over the CPUs on all their Mac stuff, at least not yet. And so the ability to simply say, if we can create a new infrastructure or a new system that will make everything faster just by virtue of the fact that you're coding more efficiently or you're using this resource that we're giving you that's really primed to give you the most direct access to the screen, that's a way so that they don't get caught wishing that they could ship faster Macs, but Intel is now a generation behind and they're not shipping on time. And it also opens the door towards, if we can speculate, the idea of Apple one day shipping an ARM-based MacBook. These are all things that it's like preparing an Indy race car. It's not that you do this one thing that makes the car 50% faster. It's you find a 0.5% here, you find 1.1% there. Before you know it, you're adding up to some real mileage.
Well, and I think that one of the things that for most hardware, and this is not just Mac hardware or PC hardware, but your microwave, it's all kinds of other things, surfacing the what it can do to the user and making it actually usable, creates incredible benefits in value without a lot of expense. So finding ways to make that a lot easier is a big deal.
The way Apple explained Metal to me is that OpenGL is based on what it's not an idea of what processors were. It's what processors were, graphics processors were 15, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And and graphics processors have come a long way. They're insanely powerful, and that growth has happened insanely quickly. And the problem is that, at least as it's explained to me, and I'm not a chip expert, but what Apple's take on this is that with Metal, they were able to base the model on what those chips are like today and how they work today. And because of that, they've lost a lot of the overhead of translating OpenGL for modern processors is thrown out. And instead, you just are closer to the Metal, hence the name. But that's something that as a platform owner, Apple gets to do that, and that's the strength. It is non-standard. It's an Apple-only thing, and I think the wedge that they're using is iOS, because iOS, people want to be on it, and they're going to adopt Metal. But it's also a cool idea to think that Apple gets to look at something like OpenGL and say, yeah, it's nice and all, but we think we could do something that has better results based on what we know about graphics technology today. And so that's what we see. So, it's a cool story. And I can't verify it. I am not a chip engineer or a graphics programmer.
There's a couple cool things there, too, is that they didn't just use OpenGL. With the new version this year, they've got OpenCL in there as well, which does the general computing stuff, so that non-games that still require intense processing benefit, not quite for free, but the same way you mentioned, it's just built in there. And some people were really upset. They're saying, there's open source technology like Vulkan and things like that can do this. But I think we've seen with OpenGL that you sort of get lowest common denominator stuff that way as well. It's not specifically tuned for any experience. And because there's so many game engines now like Epic, Unreal, or all these different engines, they can do the heavy lifting of sort of intermediating that and presenting an environment to developers. And they can toss out Vulkan, they can toss out DirectX, they can toss out Metal, and it is work for them. But for the game developers, it just means that they get best of breed on every platform. And as people who are used to gaming on the Mac, we've seen the results of cross compilers and things like Cider and companies that just try to port the stuff over. And if this encourages people to make better, more native games, then I think it's a huge win, even if it is proprietary at the very lowest levels of the platform.
Yeah, OpenCL is something that is hilarious. It's really that somebody realized there was so much processing power in the graphics processors, and you don't always need to process graphics stuff. So what if we hijacked all that power and just used it for other sorts of calculations? It's crazy, and that is in Metal. So yeah, that's good stuff. We should probably take another break because I hear the spirit of Leo Laporte beckoning me, but there's much more to talk about on MacBreak Weekly. After this, Leo, where are you?
Thank you, Jason. Our show today brought to you by Squarespace. I don't have to tell you much about Squarespace. They've been with us since almost the beginning. I feel like we're kind of linked together, arm in arm. We love Squarespace. It makes it easy for anyone to create a beautiful, professional-looking site, whether it's a personal website or if you're doing e-commerce, maybe you're a band or a restaurant. They have templates. The musical templates are incredible for bands. They let you sell merch, CDs, digital downloads. They let you put your concert schedule up. So easy. You can get your fan club president to do it. I want you to check it out. It's easy to go to squarespace.com and click the Get Started button. No credit card needed. You got 2 weeks. You can play with the templates. You can examine, how the commerce works. By the way, every single template comes with commerce. Every single plan comes with commerce. They're all mobile responsive, so that means they look great on any size screen. We found out on our website that more than half of our visitors were coming in over mobile and tablet. You've got to make sure your site looks great on all size screens. Squarespace does that with no effort on your part. I love Squarespace. By the way, it's the best hosting, too. It just never goes down. Best hosting, best software, e-commerce in every site. If you sign up for the business or commerce plan, you're going to get $100 in AdWords credit. That's nice. And we're going to get you 10% off on any plan when you use the offer code MacBreak. But before you do any of that, get started. Just try it out. Squarespace.com. And when you decide to buy, use the offer code MacBreak to get 10% off and let them know you saw it on MacBreak Weekly. Thank you, Squarespace. Squarespace, build it beautiful. Now back we go to Jason Snell and the MacBreak team.
Beautifully done, Leo. We're going to move away from betas now. We're going to go into final candidate, perhaps golden master, perhaps even get released. I wanted to talk about something that came out of beta in the last week. That's Office 2016 for Mac. Microsoft announced late last week that Office 2016 for Mac is out. The previous version was Office 2011, so yes, this is a 5-year wait for Mac users who are using Office.
Waiting for beta. Oh wait, no, not at all.
Yeah, or maybe not waiting. Well, if you're somebody who is a Mac user in an Office that is completely dominated by Microsoft Office, you've been using Office 2011, and that's not fun. So 2016 is out. It's pretty good, I have to say. It looks very much like the iOS versions and like the Windows versions. There are some options that you can make it look a little more Mac-like and a little less Mac-like. I've been trying it out, and I have to say I do think they did a very good job, but it is funny how my view of Microsoft Office has changed. I used to work in an office where I had to use it, and now I don't.
Right.
And so I think of it now as it's nice that it's there, but I realize that for some people this is it's what they rely on every day, and it's a big deal that it's here. It's just, it used to be sort of like the air we breathed, and now it's more just kind of an optional thing. Andy, Renee, Alex, any thoughts about the coming of a new version of Office for the Mac?
Well, it's certainly important. Office will never not be important for any platform that wants to be taken seriously, because it really. I keep coming back to the phrase that Office is the grease for the gears of business, all the worldwide. I think that everyone has the same attitude as you do, Jason. It's like the company car that you get issued. That nobody loves driving the fleet quality like Toyota Corolla, but it's a good car. It's reliable. They know how to work it. They know that they know how to get the radio stations working. And if you've trained up on Office, you are now trained up on every piece of software you ever need to know, no matter what job you ever take. So that's why it's important that the Mac version of Office have parity with whatever's shipping on Windows. And the Windows 10 environment is going to be pretty big in itself.
For us, I mean, we don't have any in any office in the office anymore. We pretty much use Google Docs and then Pages. Pages for stuff that we want to look pretty, and then Google Office for pretty much everything. I mean, and Google Docs for pretty much everything else, just because we need to collaborate. We don't. So and I'm sure that it does it. It's just that they do it well enough. The only thing we occasionally use is PowerPoint, because someone has a PowerPoint they want to play, and
sounds familiar.
So I have to bringing that into Keynote sometimes is laborious.
Renee, you an Office user at all?
So I'm more like the rest of mobile nations uses Google Docs, which means that our Windows site writes in Word and pastes it in, and I write in BB Edit and paste it in. And if I have to, I'll use Google Sheets, because it's really, you can't really paste stuff too comfortably into those things. I used to use Word. I worked in enterprise for years. I used Office. I used Office on the Mac. I used Office inside of Parallels or VMware when it felt like it was lagging too much to do a proper job or proper compatibility. And I am so happy I don't have to do that anymore. I know, like Andy said, it does feel like it'll always be here. I choose to have like the Marco Syracuse view, where on an infinite time scale, maybe we'll have better solutions. The thing with me with Office is that it has too many masters. Like Word, for example, it's not InDesign, but it's not text edit, and that causes a lot of tension within the app. PowerPoint and Excel are more focused, but I am happy I no longer have to run them on my Mac. I think the ability to be free from those things is highly liberating.
Well, and I think that Word, there's sometimes when I miss Word, I think that unless I don't do heavy numbers like big spreadsheets. And so because of that, I think Numbers is 1,000 times better than Excel or Google Sheets or whatever, just because it's so flexible and I can do so many things with it that you get used to doing that, and it's hard to go back. And Keynote, of course, is in the presentation world is kind of the standard. I mean, everyone just converts everything to Keynote. The client gives them PowerPoint, and then they figure out how to cobble it into Keynote, and then they give them a little switcher in there, a little pickle, and they're done.
I think what we've learned here is that we're all very fortunate because we're not people who are forced to use Office, but I know there are so many people out there who they got to use Office. And as a Mac user, you have to explain, well, I'm using 2011. It doesn't have any features and it doesn't work that way. And it doesn't run any of those things you're sending me. And I don't know what you're trying to get me to do. And that's the nice thing about this is it feels like a full peer. I would say it's the first time in a long time that Office for Mac has felt like it's actually playing the same game as Office for Windows. And Microsoft is committed to quarterly updates that will not just be bug fixes, but include new features going forward because they're in this Office 365 model now. Now, you will be able to buy a standalone version of Office this fall in September, I think Microsoft said. But if you've got a subscription to Office 365, you can get it now, and there will be updates. So I like Excel. Excel is good. I use numbers for making charts, but I use Excel or Google Sheets. But if I need to crunch a lot of numbers, I will often go in Excel. I like it a lot. I just have stopped writing in Word.
Tables.
Yeah, I do. The only times I voluntarily use Word are when I need to format something, a document that's really, really tightly formatted, and be absolutely assured that when I send it to somebody, they'll be able to make edits and send it back with those edits intact. I mean, it's there should be like a syncing wizard that just simply understands that. Okay, so what did you write this in, Scrivener? Don't worry, click this button. I will turn it into a properly formatted Word document because I can't think of many people who actually edit in Word. But the hysterically funny thing, though, is that, as you said, it's you get it as part of your Office 365 subscription, and there are many Windows 8.1 based tablets that cost like less than $100 that come with a free year of Office 365 that you can then apply to any two mobile, it comes with like a free, it includes a license for mobile and a license for desktop. So you can like go to Micro Center, spend $70 on a Winbook TW700. It comes with like the card. Here's your registration for Office 365. Forget about the Winbook, and you apply one license to your iPad and one license to your MacBook, and it's good for an entire year. So get this free, like not really good, but great for free, Kindle reader or movie player when you buy your Office 365 subscription through Micro Center.
I will say that PowerPoint is a lot better on the Mac now. That was the app, in my mind, that had the greatest gap between the iWork apps and Microsoft Office. Was Keynote is so good. Keynote, you could argue, I would argue actually, is the best of the iWork apps, and PowerPoint was the worst of the Office apps in my estimation. And PowerPoint 2016 for Mac is a lot better, so much so that you could open it and say, hey, it feels a little bit like Keynote. It's not Keynote, but it's not awful like PowerPoint 2011 was, because I used that. So that was awful. When my bosses would send me these PowerPoint presentations, and they'd say, Jason, you need to put in your slides, and I would look at it and think, okay, this isn't Keynote, this isn't Keynote, and Keynote trained me so much that I was completely baffled by PowerPoint, and so it's good.
Well, and sometimes I think it's the aesthetic too. Is the people who use Keynote versus people who use because there's this thing about like let's not put a whole like novel on one page, that occurs on PowerPoint documents more often. I think in Keynote you just think about it. I don't know. I think you watch a lot of, if you're using Keynote, you're watching a lot of Apple presentations. Yeah. And you get used to, okay, we're not gonna beat people into the ground with text, on there. That's
you never get inspired by PowerPoint. Like I still remember a time when I was doing like my final edits. I was in Philadelphia, I think, to give a keynote presentation, and I was like giving my final like revision of my slide deck, and then it suddenly occurred to me, I hit upon two slides where I had like a sort of an underscore separating the title from like a bullet point sort of thing, and I'd accidentally misformatted one of them so that the bar was in one place with one slide and then another place in another slide. And unfortunately, I'd used like a magic move transition, but it said, oh, well, you have a line here. What if we just like animate this moving down between slides? And then there I am now losing like another 90 minutes of sleep because that's a cool effect. What if that line is on every single slide, but it keeps moving like up and down, like to accent different points? And if I were doing PowerPoint, the slide deck would not have been quite so visually interesting, and I would have gotten another 90 minutes of sleep the night before my keynote.
I think this will be the last keynote thing, but I did a spec for one of our clients. I was going to do the whole all the animations in motion mostly. I was going to do all this stuff and the stuff flying around, but I just did this real quick 2.5 minutes in Keynote and had things animated and rolling around and doing all little things in Keynote. And I wanted to show him what I was going to do in motion. And so I showed it to him and he said, well, this is great. And then can you just send us the video? And I was like, there's more. And he's like, no, we don't need any more. That's quite okay. So it was, I was amazed at how close you could get to, to a final video, with with a silly presentation machine.
We should shift gears. I am looking at a Wall Street Journal report that says Apple recorded 92% of the total operating income from the world's 8 top smartphone makers in the first quarter, up from 65% a year earlier. Now, there are estimates of shipping units, and there is market share, and there's profit share, and I sometimes think we all get a little too caught up in it. But it is still kind of mind-boggling to think that, according to this report, 92% of the profits being made by smartphone makers are being scooped up by Apple. It's like a made-up number.
According to their analytics, and I'm never sure how well people specify exactly what the analytics are based on. So it always behooves you to click through and see what company and what methodologies they use and how well accepted they are. But I think there's a couple things to pull from this. One is, like you said, there's sell through and sell in and channel stuffing and all these different things that measure sort of quantity of devices sold and market share. And profit share is really different. It's how much money that they're making. And Apple's proven again with the Mac that they can have a very small market share and making huge amounts of profit compared to the industry. And this is the same. Android has by far the biggest market share, but Apple is crushing, there's no other word for it, it's crushing the profit share. And what's interesting is about a year or so ago, Apple had 65% of profit in the mobile industry. And that's because Apple had 0% share in over 4-inch sized phones. They didn't make any. And Samsung had the Galaxy series, the Galaxy S series, the Galaxy Note series, all bigger than 4 inches. And that's where Samsung, who was really the only other profitable company, was getting their money from. So the minute Apple started making bigger phones, they were going to take some part of that share, whether it was 1%, 5%, 100%. That was up for debate. And now we're seeing that it's actually quite a lot of that. And it sort of goes to the crux of the Apple-Samsung dilemma, in that Samsung has always been really good at making money when Apple didn't do something. Like when Apple wasn't on Verizon, Samsung became the not iPhone that you could get on Verizon, and then Apple eventually went to Verizon, and that balanced out, and Apple ended up for a while selling most of the phones on Verizon. And now we saw that some people really wanted a bigger screen phone, and they just couldn't get one from Apple, so they got a not iPhone from Samsung on some other platform. And now they can get a bigger screen iPhone, and they're choosing to do that. And that's incredibly good news for Apple. It sort of speaks to the trends and where people want to get their phones. And there's a lot of really good points to be made about Apple not serving the lower end budget market, absolutely. But just in terms of share of the premium smartphone sector in general, it's really hard for me to see where competitors go from now. And I desperately want like all the HTCs and Motorola's to make a lot of money because I want a ton of different options. But I think the strategy of being not iPhone is gone now. You just can't make that your business. And I hope that sort of generates interest in these companies to make something truly different and try to make people want their phone rather than not using it as an alternative until Apple enters a market.
Well, Renee and I talked about this on This Week in Tech on Sunday night. And every time this sort of topic comes up, I mean, you're right, Jason. It's like, it's a high number and it's a really good number, but it's a lot. It's an inside baseball sort of thing, and a lot of people who are just like rah Apple supporters like to point to it as a reason why Apple's running their business so much better than everybody else. And there are a lot of good arguments behind it. It's always necessary to point out though that Apple is not. Apple is really, really interested in always pursuing markets where there are going to be high margins. That's why they're making a $10,000 solid gold gadget watch, but they're not making a phone that people in Pakistan and India can afford. They're not making a notebook that anybody who has less than $900 can come in and buy. So they're also, you also look at, we're not talking about the laptop, the macOS business, but it's part of that same larger point where Apple makes a huge amount of profits on in laptops, but they also have a segment of the market that's only twice the percentage of the Windows Phone segment of the phone market. Meanwhile, other companies have to be able to serve the needs of people who, again, don't have $900 or $650 to spend on a phone. I'm not capable of really analyzing where the new money comes from, whether Samsung and HTC are in the business of making not phones. I would say, however, that they do very, very well at selling things to people who want them. The fact that Android, for instance, is so much larger market than the iPhone indicates that there are people who are admiring iPhones from a distance, but they simply can't afford to own one. So I would again, it's a good number. The good takeaway for actual users is that with all this money coming in, it allows Apple to do a lot of research to fully develop products that they never even leak to the newspapers. They're so out there. But let's also point out that Apple has never demonstrated an ability to create a single phone or a single computer that could, again, be the gears of the world, be the grease of the world. They're very good at figuring out, here's where the money is. We're going to sell things to people who have lots of money. So there's an upside, there's a downside.
And I think that one of the challenges for some of the Android makers is that one of the things that they've seen in China and a couple of, and I don't know where the article is, but they were talking about the fact that a lot of people, as their income goes up, they're not sticking with the same operating system that they had. They have Android phones when they get started, and they just go buy iPhones. That's kind of like part of their graduation from, and it is a bit of a status symbol in a lot of these countries. And so I think that you would think that the Android manufacturers would be benefiting from early, users using theirs first, but it doesn't. Sometimes that shift is something that a lot of them are kind of moving on, from that operating system. And so that's going to be a real challenge as it continues to expand.
It's funny, you get used to hearing Apple put in context of market share, and then there's this profit share number, which is very different. And it says, I don't think it is the final answer, and I think some people will make it out to be that, but I think it's very interesting that that this is the case, that Apple, it shows you what Apple's targeting here, which is the most profitable segments of the market, and it does very well in those segments. And the flip side is that there are other companies that are shipping a whole lot of phones, but their margins are a lot tighter, and that means they're not making as much profit. It's good news for Apple and for people who like Apple, but I think it also is just descriptive of how Apple runs its business right now versus how some other competitors are running their business.
And it's not entirely an Apple thing, and it's happened throughout history. Like if you look, some companies, if you have something that is unique, like Apple's differentiator is iOS, but if you're one of 8 Android vendors who are making Android phones, sometimes you choose to differentiate based on price, and then you lower prices. And we saw this in netbooks and in PCs for years. And you start to compete on price, and there's no loyalty to brand based on price. Your loyalty is to the price point. So some people will buy Apple because it's Apple, but if you're trying to get the people who will be buying based on lowest price, if your competitor slashes their prices further, people will just go and buy that, and it's not sustainable. Like all the people who dumped VHS equipment, now you hardly see them anymore. They've become brands that are rebought and resold by Walmart. And the same thing happened with a lot of computer companies. And with phone companies, I understand why they want to make cheap phones. I think there is a noble reason to make it, but some of them also just want market share and cut prices to non-sustainable levels.
Oh, yeah.
And then you see businesses where, like Nokia and HTC, where I want these to be hugely successful companies, and I hope they find ways of being that. But just being the budget company, I think, also has a lot of drawbacks.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be inferred that HTC or Samsung or any of these other companies are doing things. So they have this altruistic sense of, we are going to make sure that the potato farmer in a country in Africa, in a poor village inside an African country, can make sure that he has access to the internet and phones. They are trying to build a business that they can succeed at. It's not always a drive toward the bottom. Sometimes there's a drive towards not trying to make the $79 Windows tablet, but saying, well, what if we were to make a computer for $600? There are superb Windows laptops that sell for $600. There are phones that sell for $299 and you own it. And if you were to look at the specs, benchmark it, look at how good the camera works, look at the features of it, look at the build quality, look at how it's styled, you would not guess this is a $299 and you own it phone. You would think that it is not necessarily an iPhone 6, but something that is at least up there. If you put like a $20 fancy leather back on it, maybe it would look like an iPhone 6. So I just think that I'm glad that there are companies that are pursuing all kinds of different price points and all kinds of different designs, and also making the point that you don't necessarily need a $700 phone, whether it's an iPhone 6 or a Samsung Galaxy S6, which is also, again, a luxury brand phone. What I love about the diversity is that showing people that maybe it's okay to have a $1,500 budget for computers that you can spread out across 3 medium-priced devices, like a medium-priced tablet, a medium-priced notebook, and even an Internet of Things device, instead of having to roll the dice on one thing that where so much of the feature set is the chamfer angle on the aluminum on the edge of the screen, you know.
And I think that one of the things that would change this completely is if Android had a much less fragmented market, because it doesn't give it the same strength that it would have if there was a unified, if everyone upgraded to Lollipop, you know, if 80% upgraded to Lollipop or whatever, you would have it would have a much greater force in the industry. But because it is so fragmented, I think that because of the various cell phone manufacturers don't want to upgrade or don't want to provide certain things or don't want to go down certain paths, I think that Android loses a lot of the advantages that it would have as a share leader, because it's not really a share leader, because all those operating systems are tiny little percentages that are split among I don't know how many at this point.
Well, this is an interesting conversation, although if you just tuned in, it is an Android Weekly. It is MacBreak Weekly. We're going to move on and talk about something from across the pond. Gore blimey. That's not an English accent. Go blimey, governor! Apple Pay launched in the UK, 250,000 stores, 8 different banks participating 9 months after its release in the US. So you can go to your chemist, go to Boots, go do some shopping at Waitrose, you can board the tube, all using Apple Pay. Renee, you're practically English because you're in Canada. What do you think?
Well, first, I didn't know where Mike Hurley came from for a second. I thought he replaced you as host there for just a moment, Jason. Accent was so perfect. Yeah, we have the same queen, but unfortunately, we don't have the same access to Apple Pay. I think it's terrific that Apple Pay is broadening. It started off in the US, it's now in the UK. The UK launched with more support than the US originally had. It was interesting to see everyone with their Apple Watches on their right wrist trying to go through the tube, because apparently watches go on the different side of the road in the UK, at least in Apple marketing material. But yeah, I think this is great. I'm hopeful that we get it in Canada soon, because we have the same sort of infrastructure. Europe has the same infrastructure. The Pacific, a lot of the I don't know what you call it in English, the Ocean Pacific countries, Australia, New Zealand, have a lot of the same infrastructure that is, you know, NFC based transactions. The only thing that I think will help make a difference in the US and elsewhere is that they're going to support loyalty cards, and another word for rewards cards, starting with iOS 9. Because one of the problems Apple has just in general is that they don't like to share a lot of data, and that upsets companies who make a lot of money or just provide a lot of intelligence from getting demographic information and other data from transactions and from customer interactions. But with loyalty cards and reward cards, you're sort of sidestepping that. You don't need the transaction anymore because the customer specifically sought out your reward card and is willing to trade that information for whatever points or incentives you give them. And I think the companies that are hesitant to join in with Apple Pay because they don't get the same sort of transactional data they would get with other sorts of payment systems, hopefully that will break down their last resistance and it'll just be everywhere soon.
Yeah, you know, they last time I was in London, everybody is using chipped cards on the tube. You can actually just tap your credit card, and it's smart enough. It's not just a transaction; it's monitoring when you enter and exit the tube, and it figures out what your rate is going to be, and then it charges your card. That it's very intelligent. So that now, since they built that infrastructure out, they're able to apply it to Apple Pay as well. I know my friends in England are very excited that they've got this. And Scotland and Wales too. Sorry, and Northern Ireland. I don't want to leave anybody out. I've already angered so many people, including everybody in Montreal, because it is a French city, but they still have an English queen. It's just it's not me. I didn't do it. It's just how it is. We before I create more international incidents, I think maybe we should take a break and hear from the master who never has created an international incident in his life, although he might be creating one right now, Leo Laporte, with our next sponsor.
Thanks, Jason. One more little bit I want to talk about before we get back to the Apple news, and that's a brand new sponsor for us. And it's a little complicated for me to explain, but I think you're going to get this, and I think you're going to like it. It's called Wealthfront, and it's a low-cost automated investment service. They're using software to do things remarkable, basically. I want you to try it out. You know, if you're going to an investment advisor, you're letting somebody else, do your long-term investing. That's for a house or for your retirement. You're probably paying that advisor between 1% to 2% to 3% in fees, not to mention the transaction fees, the charges. Wealthfront is It's 0.25% a year, 0.25% per year. It's 25 basis points. Nobody does it for that. It's incredible. And I mean, there's no commission. There's no hidden fees. If you had a $30,000 account with Wealthfront, less than $5 a month, and they do an amazing job. They're going to auto balance everything. They do some things that are super sophisticated you really couldn't do by yourself. Things like tax loss harvesting, and they do direct indexing. They're going to optimize your after-tax returns, lowering your tax bill and giving you the highest possible return on your investments. No wonder they've got over $2.4 billion in client assets. The company itself in the last 2 years, I mean, they're not very old. They've grown. Their investment fund has grown 20 times. Wealthfront. I want you to learn more. You can actually go right now to wealthfront.com/MacBreak. Sign up. No cost to you, and you can get the portfolio. You can see what they would propose. You'll answer some questions about your risk tolerance, your time frame, that kind of thing. This is so much better than a traditional advisor. Even if you yourself trade, for your own account or you're a day trader, I think you're going to want to check out Wealthfront and put in some money, because if you right now sign up at wealthfront.com/MacBreak, they're going to manage your first $15,000 free of charge. No basis points, free of charge. And that's not just for a year or so, that's forever. For compliance purposes, I have to tell you, Wealthfront Incorporated is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are offered through Wealthfront Brokerage Corporation, member FINRA and SIPC. This is not a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Investing in securities involves risks, and there is the possibility of losing money. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Please visit wealthfront.com to read their full disclosure. I wish I could do this. Silly SEC. SEC regulations don't allow a company like Wealthfront to do testimonials from customers. So I was going to sign up, and they said you can't. Because then you would be a customer, and this would be a testimonial from a customer. So this is the first time ever we've had an advertiser. I wish they would stop, so I could use the product. Hey, you can use it. Wealthfront.com/MacBreak. Your first $15,000 fee-free forever. Find out about this. You're going to be blown away. Wealthfront.com/MacBreak. Now, back to Mr. Snell and his gang of four.
Well, I'm glad we have actually four of us on the show today, or that would have been strange.
Awkward.
My invisible friend also here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Flash. I hate to say that this is the point and laugh segment, but it may be a little bit. Alex Stamos, who is the recently appointed CSO, Chief Security Officer at Facebook, went on Twitter the other day and basically said, Adobe needs to kill Flash. They need to literally announce a day and say, on this day, everybody's going to agree. We're going to turn off Flash. Flash is going to go away, because that's the only way that, as Mr. Stamos put it, only way to disentangle the dependencies and upgrade the whole ecosystem at once. Now, famously, iOS never shipped with Flash. Steve Jobs wrote his thoughts about Flash, and we've had this world where Flash's importance on the web has faded away.
Well, not only its importance, but its detriment. I mean, it is the 0-day exploits are becoming really problematic. I mean, we have a lot of our clients that won't let us use any Flash, for what we do, which is very difficult.
And that's why this is the CSO of Facebook saying Flash is a problem. It's a security problem. And, the whole web doesn't rely on it, but there's still a lot of things on the web that rely on it. And I think it's an interesting point where such an influential group as Facebook saying, look, we just got to stop this because the security implications are way too great.
It's the open window on the house of the internet, Jason.
That's scary.
It really is.
I know a lot of people who use Chrome as their dedicated Flash browser. They may use Safari with Flash not installed on their Mac, but they use Chrome when they need to load something in Flash on the desktop. And the scary thing about these security stories is, some of them are some of the security breaches, my understanding, are problematic enough that you kind of just don't want to run Flash anywhere ever, because you really open yourself up to a lot of risk. The
hard part is that, and that is needed, in places like live streaming, which is what we do a lot of. Taking Flash out of that mix is very complicated. It is not there. Dash and a lot of the other solutions are not mature yet. So a deadline would definitely help accelerate that process, because people are kind of just slowly moving along and using the other ones as backups and not really
hoping to get away with not having to make change.
We know we have to get there, and we're kind of getting there. But if there was a day that like my stream will no longer work, there would be an accexisting in development.
At the end of 2016, mid 2017, even.
Yep.
The hard thing with a lot of this is that, like Alex's point, Flash exists because it solved a really bad problem. The internet just did not have functionality, and Flash managed to provide it, and it did a lot of things that made the internet much better. And to this day, Don Melton was just talking about this. A lot of the streaming media apps, like if you subscribe to Spotify and I think a couple of the others, their app is a wrapper around Flash because there's all sorts of file system access and things that Flash just makes super easy. And that's also the detrimental part of Flash, is that it makes all this access super easy. It's basically a runtime, and we have solutions for like HTML5 video, but we don't have really good solutions for all the other stuff yet. You know, there's a lot of web standards that have been proposed, but Flash started as this wonderful little frame-based animation thing, and it's just budged into an underpinning of the internet, and removing it is non-trivial. But it's gotten to the point where, like Jason said, I haven't had Safari Flash installed in Safari since Apple stopped installing Flash on Safari. I had it in Chrome, and now I'm reticent to even launch it in Chrome, and I wish I could unbundle it there. And just making a drop dead date, I think we need to really make sure that the technologies are there and that all the companies that are using Flash, I remember some companies just use Flash to have an open-in dialogue on the web so you could upload files, and all that stuff still has to work. So I don't know how easy it's going to be.
Well, it is, but it is that thing, because it is that one thing that works everywhere. I mean, I think that's the whole thing. You know, there's a lot of, you know, other technologies that are being used, and they work on this browser but not that browser, and this thing over here but not that thing.
And often Flash is the fallback that happens.
It's the fallback that kind of works on everything.
Andy, you were going to say something?
Yeah, it's not just for playing video. A lot of developers use it because you can build this once and then deploy it on all kinds of different systems without having to. It's a time saver, but it's a one that causes all the problems that we've been talking about. And also, it needs to be pointed out that when Steve Jobs wrote his letter in April of 2010. He was, in my opinion, he was spreading a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And 2010 was not a good year to get rid of Flash. As you could remember, if you were using an iPad for the first couple of years of its existence, it's like you get to use all the web except for the 20% that has video and other content that will give you a beautiful little puzzle piece instead of something else. But that was 5 years ago, and almost everything that can use Flash has decided to use something other than Flash because it's such a pig. And it is a good time to finally delete the floppy drive from the iMac, where it's going to cause some problems initially, but now there are people who really need that. They have the ability to help their own transition, and it really is a situation where we're never going to get rid of it until there's an actual drop dead date, until Adobe actually pulls the plug on it.
But this is certainly a case where I think Apple's decision not to include Flash on iOS moved along the lack of enthusiasm in all circles for Flash.
And when it came out, there was a big discussion about whether not having Flash would kill iOS or iOS would kill Flash. Most people thought it would be one or the other, and it turned.
Well, Android backed out of Flash too, you know.
Well, it never worked. Flash on mobile was like one of the biggest lies perpetrated on consumers, because Adobe would just say Apple wouldn't let us have Flash on the iPhone, and Apple was painted as a villain. And in truth, Adobe could not ship Flash for mobile, and I had it on my Palm Pre when it eventually shipped, and on my BB10, and on my Android device, and it took years to get out, and the version they got out was horrible. So I understand Andy's point about Steve Jobs' letter, but I think it was 100% accurate, and I think we can't kill Flash fast enough. We just have to make sure that everyone else who is supporting these technologies gets off it in time too.
I just remember the first mobile device I had that had Flash support built in was the BlackBerry Playbook, and it was the only thing. It was the only good thing I can write about it, which is that wow, I can actually watch CBS.com content. And unlike this is where my opinion on Steve Jobs' letter was really formulated, because he was saying, oh, it's going to kill the battery. Not really. I mean, it's certainly faster than not running Flash content. It's going to be buggy and unstable. No, it's running fine. It's going to be a frame rate that makes it unwatchable. No, it's pretty much as good as Flash on the desktop. And when other content was available on other devices, the same stuff proved to be true. It was still a platform that needed to die, that was on its way out. Back in 2010 or 2011, I was talking to some people I know at a couple of different TV shows who's responsible for creating video content for network sites. And they were saying, well, we already have a roadmap because we can't get rid of Flash fast enough. So I think that Flash needed to stay around for a few years while all these big bruisers figured out a way to adopt better standards. But again, my own opinion is that the Steve Jobs letter was mostly fear, uncertainty, and doubt. He was making claims that did not prove true when I had Flash on a mobile device, not just like 3 generations or 4 generations in. I'm talking about the first device I got that had Flash on it had none of the disadvantages that Steve Jobs was talking about.
That was later. That was like 3 years after.
That we still need Flash. I'm just saying that in 2010, 2011, it was just not true.
Yeah, well, that's years after Adobe said that Apple wouldn't let him do it. So the timeline was very different.
Well, Flash is fading from prominence, and I think the most telling thing about this story about the Facebook CSO saying Flash should go away is that there didn't seem to be a whole lot of hubbub about it, and it wouldn't surprise me if at some point Adobe does announce their. Surely Adobe has seen the writing on the wall for a lot of this about putting it in maintenance mode and saying that Flash support is going to go away at some point. That doesn't seem unreasonable, and there was a time when that seemed impossible for Adobe to say that. But Adobe's business has moved on. Adobe put all its eggs in that basket for a while there on the web. You know, they bought Macromedia, and they took Shockwave, and they built Flash, and you know, that was their web strategy and their web authoring strategy for ages. But it's really not anymore. That company has changed dramatically.
They Omniture.
Yeah, so I think that Flash's days, certainly of prominence, are at an end, and perhaps its days altogether as well. We should move on to less controversial topics, like if Pluto is a planet or not.
It's definitely a planet.
It is totally not a planet.
It is definitely a planet.
It would definitely kill you if it fell on you. That's planet enough for me.
It's a minor. Well, it's a minor planet, but regardless of what Pluto is, it's neat. And
is it a robot, Jason?
We should say it is not a robot. Well, we don't know. What we now know, it is definitely not a robot. Pluto, we should just say this. This is not Mac-related at all, but it's cool. This is the day that the New Horizons spacecraft flew past Pluto. We don't actually know if it survived as we record this because it is so busy taking pictures. It was moving so fast that it had to spend all of its time during its flyby taking pictures and not communicating with Earth. So it will be a few hours. Oh, very nice. We've got a picture of Mickey's friend, planet Pluto.
You know, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.
You cannot unsee
You cannot
it.
deny, can you?
Some people say it looks like a heart. And it's maybe even a little, Pluto's got a little heart and it's got little hands hugging the heart there. But it is the best pictures by far that we've ever had of Pluto. And hopefully later today, as we record this on Tuesday the 14th, we'll hear the all clear from New Horizons. I wanted to mention some tech things about this just because I think they're cool. New Horizons runs on a 12 megahertz MIPS processor. It was launched into space before there was an iPhone. It transmits about 1,000 K per second back to Earth from 4 billion miles away. So it's a very slow modem connection, and it takes 4.5 hours for a signal to reach Earth from the vicinity of Pluto, where New Horizons is. Fortunately, all of its instruments were working today, assuming it didn't get hit by space debris. It saved all of that data to its SSDs, essentially. It's flash storage. It's got solid-state memory that it stores everything in. And over the next, not day, not week, not month, but almost the next year, it will slowly trickle back all of its science data. So this is entirely a story about delayed gratification, but NASA is one to understand the PR value of what it does.
It's a year of releases. That's what that is.
It may also take, it may have like 10,000 different images that it took in the last couple of hours, but they know which one is going to be the most spectacular, and that's the one that's going to uplink immediately, right? So
you're saying that 2015 is the tick release. Next year will be the talk release of data.
Well played.
They just released. Yeah, there you go. They just released the color data, color images a few minutes ago.
Yeah, just because you fly by it in a couple of hours doesn't mean you've got a year's worth. You don't have a year's worth of news. We definitely do that. But just think about the old, as technology people, think about the old tech that's in there and the slow connection, and they have to cache everything because they don't have enough time to get it back right away. But still, with all the old tech that they've got, and it's actually from a platform built in the 90s, and then it got canceled and it got revived. So it's very old tech, and yet it is producing pretty spectacular images and other science data. So I just think it's a cool story.
And just think, if you move to Pluto, you would still be able to text message.
Yeah,
I mean,
the internet out
that's
there
what I'm
is
taking with me.
the internet out there is very, very slow, is what I'm saying. But
like being on a cruise ship almost.
We've proven it's not a battle station, it's not Unicron, and it's not some other galaxy's prison. So we've managed to do 3 very important things today, Jason.
Or the Pluto's overlords have managed to convince our spacecraft to come over to their side and tell us the lies that serve their interests.
Ambassador,
I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's definitely what happened.
So I don't want to assume things, but I know at least 2 of you well enough to know that you are nerds. And Alex, I'm just going to guess that you are too. Comic-Con was last week. Do we have any feelings about Comic-Con as we're getting toward the end of the show? And I we're nerdy people here.
Do we have another hour, Jason?
Do you have? I don't want to debate the DC cinematic universe's design decisions. But I am curious if you had any favorite news from Comic-Con that you wanted to point out. It's almost like a pick of the week.
I love the Star Wars backstream footage. I mean, the real sets, real locations, the real Chewbacca, real Han Solo. I was really trepidatious about Star Wars anything anymore, and I can't say it won me over completely, but I may or may not be lining up for the movie already now.
The line may extend to your house, is what you're saying.
I got to say, they showed the first finished Batman versus Superman trailer, and I don't want to get ahead of the story, but it almost seems as though they heard a lot of the complaints, a lot of the loudest complaints about the Man of Steel movie, and said, well, what if we made that part of the story of this one, where there was so much damage that this did not go unnoticed, and the reappearance of Jesus Christ, the appearance of Jesus Christ on Earth is going to have a natural effect upon the population. It really got me excited about this in a way that the announcement of Ben Affleck playing Batman did not get me excited about this thing.
I had the exact opposite reaction. This was so bleak it made Suicide Squad look joyful to me.
Oh, but it's DC. It's DC, which means that for my personal thing, unless we're about to turn this into an episode of The Incomparable, but like to me, I've always had this. I seem to have consistent reactions. No Marvel movie has ever made me feel a moment of actual emotional connection to any of the people in it. No DC movie has ever made me laugh.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think they're both really good at really different things. And when they make mistakes that are consistent with those things that at least I've seen about.
Biting indictment of Green Lantern just slid right under the door.
the Deadpool trailer. Oh, God, that was even better.
Don't put Ryan Reynolds in superhero movies. Oh, wait, they did. He's going to be in Deadpool.
Oh, screw it. Let's make this an R. Let's go for it.
Any other nerd news that we need to cover here just because we've got the cameras on?
Slightly un-nerd news. Jennifer Lawrence is still really cool.
All right.
I saw the excerpts of her. It's just every time she gets on a panel, you just want to see what comes out of her mouth.
Yeah, she has no filter, and it's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
It's so much fun. She just goes off. And off she goes, and there she goes,
My Comic-Con highlight is probably watching Peter Capaldi, who is the current Doctor Who, walking around San Diego. He'd never been to Comic-Con before. I think, there's one thing to know that your show is an international hit, and there's another thing to go to another country, since Doctor Who is an English show, to go to another country and see a wall of fans at a giant convention and people waiting in line overnight to see you on a panel. And he walked around San Diego and told some stories about it, and I thought that was adorable. I mean, the panel was interesting, I suppose, but I just love the idea that these English actors who have no idea what they're getting into when they fly into San Diego and the sun is shining and there are fans everywhere, and they realize that it's not all just these cold studios in Wales where they shoot the show. That was my favorite thing from Comic-Con. We should move on to the picks of the week. Andy and Nyko, do you have a pick for us?
Yes, I do. I don't know. I don't remember any of us on this show making this a pick of the week. I just got this. Amazon just sent me this a few weeks ago. It is the Amazon Echo, which I absolutely love. It is essentially their version of Siri, only there is no screen, there is no nothing. There is just an omnidirectional microphone and a really good speaker. And it's a great device if you have a pass-through between your kitchen and your living room, which is where I have it. That means that pretty much anywhere on the first floor, I'll be washing dishes and it occurs to me, I could be listening to music right now, and I will say, hey, keyword, or not even hey, just keyword name, play me Abbey Road Side 2, and it will start playing it. Or I'll be watching Top Gear, and they'll say, the new Caterham M5 weighs only 503 kilograms. And I can say, Alexa, how much is 503 kilograms in pounds? And it's sort of like the same sort of stuff that really excited me about getting smartwatches that have voice commands built in. You don't recognize how much you're being distracted by any kind of a screen until you don't have to do that anymore. And the number of times that I'm in the kitchen and I will literally be closing the door to the oven and just simply saying, set a timer for 23 minutes, and a timer for 23 minutes starts going. Not having to look up from what I'm doing, just simply in passing, and all this stuff happens. Really, really cool. It's the thing that got it. It achieved one of its core goals, in that it sold me more Amazon products, in that I'd never really found a need to upload my entire music library to Amazon Cloud Storage until I had the ability to access the entire thing just with a voice command. I got to say that I've got Sonos speakers, and so I can activate it anytime by getting my iPhone out. But it's so much simpler, just simply call out, play the Marriage of Figaro, and just simply it starts happening. I'd much rather hear it through this mono thing. So I'm really, really happy with it. A review is going to be coming soon. It's $179, which is not a whole lot of money for this. The other reason to recommend it today is that tomorrow is the big super promotional. Hey, Amazon's having this big Black Friday sort of event for Amazon Prime members. There is a rumor that this is normally $180, that they're going to discount it to $130 tomorrow. At $179, I was thinking of buying one for my own so that I could have one after I have to send this back. For $130, I'm almost definitely going to buy one. It's just really, really. I'm surprised by how cool it is and how much I'm using it, and so that's my pick of the week.
That's great. I was visiting our mutual friend, Mr. Dan Morin, and he's got one of those. And the thing that blew me away is not just play this album or this artist, but just say play some jazz.
Yeah,
it has
a lot of intelligence. Also, developers can write apps, so quote unquote, for it. So it has connectivity to like home automation. So you can say,
yeah, you turn off the light. Actually, you can say, and a Wemo switch will turn off, and yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, Alex, what do you have?
I've got two things. One is a website that I would suggest just checking out. It's called Virtual Photo Walks, and this is it's a site mostly for folks who have some disabilities, and what they do is they take photographers and they actually stream it using Google Hangouts and everything else. And we've worked with them a little bit in the past, and it's just this great. What they do is they experience going to different places, and they can do it from their house, but you can watch those as well. It's just a very, very interesting concept, and so definitely check that out. I think it's kind of cool, and then one of the other things that we've been doing, of course, a lot of is 360-degree spherical production. And one of the things, the first problem you're going to have is what cameras to use and how to get them all together. And I've got a lot of GoPros now, so I've got got like all these little 6-camera and 7-camera and 8-camera rigs. And but then the next step is trying to stitch them together. And there's a couple different pieces of software that stitch these together. And we have used, I think, all of them, or very close to all of them. And the one that we found to be the best so far is called Kohler. And we're not the only ones, because GoPro bought them. so now but we didn't start using this, but we've kind of grown to using it. And so anyway, so Kohler is a piece of software that'll take your cameras, and it does, you can have lots of different configurations. They don't have to be a very specific one. They do sell hardware rigs. I actually don't like their hardware rigs as much as some of the other ones. They're nice and small, but I have some heating issues. But with the software itself, I think is really great. And so you auto panel video, and then there's GigaPan that you can use as well, and you get these. There you go. So that's and of course, if you have if you have the spherical, if you have I don't know why I'm suddenly blanking out, but an Oculus or if you're shooting for cardboard, or if you're shooting for any of these other things, you can use this software to kind of stitch all those videos back together. And so typically when you're looking at any of these, this is anywhere from 2 to 16 cameras that are being seamlessly stitched back to a continuous video altogether. And so it might actually be the future.
That's wild.
So anyway, that's the cool software, and you can download a demo and play with it. Then you have to get a bunch of cameras. But.
Awesome. Renee, what do you have?
I have.
Look, Andy is in that ultralight right now.
It doesn't work unless you hold your jaw slack while using VR.
iBooks author, huh, Renee? I predict.
All right, so I'm gonna channel Senator Caldwell here for a second. And iBooks Author was great. It came out and it let you make these really immersive, really high quality books. Except there were two problems. It was iPad only, and unless you made it for the iBooks ecosystem, it's greatly reduced what you could do. The new version of iBooks Author, version 2.3, which has been a long time coming, does two really awesome things. First, it adds complete support along with iOS 9 for sure. I'm not sure if it's in 8.4, but iOS 9 for sure. It lets you make iBooks Author books for the iPhone as well. And that means you can get the same sort of really great, really interactive experience that you've been enjoying on your iPad on the iPhone. And that's a big deal for people who want to use the software, because iBooks Author is really good. It's what you see is what you get. It makes it much simpler to create these kind of books than other tools. But you had to decide, ease of creation versus very limited audience, just iPad users. And now you can hit iPhone users as well. But what's more is they've added support for EPUB 3, and they've sort of opened up their licensing. So you can just use it not only to make the iBooks files, but to make real EPUB 3 format files that have almost, Senator could tell you for sure what the exact differences are, but have a huge level of interactivity. I think there's fewer widgets or maybe something available. But still, if you don't want to use iBooks, but you want a what you see is what you get ebook creation tool for the Mac, iBooks Author has just pole vaulted itself out of maybe a niche product into a really good alternative for almost anyone, especially small businesses, independent publishers, one-person shops. If you've had your heart set on making a really, really cool ebook, I would seriously look at iBooks Author 2.3. It's suddenly become fantastic.
Yeah, people were a lot upset with Apple about the terms of the original iBooks Author license. Yes. And my understanding is those have changed, so that's good. So you can build things in iBooks Author and use them elsewhere, which is...
And you can publish now to anything. I mean, I think when it started, of course, it was an iPad only thing.
iOS 8.4, I want to say, or 8.0.4 allows iPhones to use it, as Renee was saying. So yeah, it's no longer this thing that only works on iPads. Is basically the story.
I was so excited to see that. That's just great.
That's great.
Apple doing good for everybody. It's just great.
My pick is not exciting because we already talked about it, but I want to give a plug to a young up-and-coming Mac developer who's making some apps that look pretty nice, and they're a little bit of an underdog, but you might want to give them a chance. It's Microsoft Office 2016 for Mac. Excel's really nice, and they have pretty colors now. So check it out, because if you need to use Office, you know it, and you should go get it because it's good, and it's way better than what was there in Office 2011. So check it out. And that's all I have to say about Office.
It's too bad it's not a game with in-app purchases, because they can't make any money off of this. But still, you like to see these youngsters in their kitchen tables just trying.
Yeah, they're giving it a go.
Teaching themselves Swift, and then realizing, this little experimental project, maybe other people would want to use it. That's just great. It's spunky.
They are a spunky team. They're somewhere Seattle area, I think, but I don't know exactly. It's a coffee shop, I'm pretty sure, that they're working out of. Well, we have reached the end of this MacBreak Weekly. I want to thank all of my panelists for being so gentle with a first-time MacBreak Weekly guest host. Alex, thanks for keeping me company here at the table.
My pleasure.
Renee Ritchie, imore.com, and many other places. Thank you so much. I was glad that you could join us today, as always.
Thank you. Awesome job, Jason. Thank you so much.
Thank you. They haven't thrown me out yet. That may happen as soon as we're done. Andy Anatko, I have known you for far longer than either of us care to admit. It was a pleasure sharing this.
So long that you were the person who told me how to use the bold tag in HTML. That's how long we've known each other.
Yeah, back when it was B and not strong. So it was a long time ago.
We're old people. We're hopefully we'll start to, as we enter our 50s, we will get into the respectful elder sage part of the industry, as opposed to the burned out old men who've forgotten how to love.
Where's my cane? Get off my lawn, you
I need
kids.
to waggle something to something.
Something like that. And if you don't know who has been talking to you for the last couple of hours, I'm Jason Snell. I write about Apple stuff at sixcolors.com. I podcast about pop culture stuff at theincomparable.com and about tech stuff at relay.fm. So check me out at all those various places. And that's it for this edition of MacBreak Weekly. So get back to work. Break time is over!